Welcome to the Chemo Café, episode 2, part 1 of Living with the Big Purple C. In part 1, I talk about the first few days following my formal diagnosis, meeting my oncologist and dealing with chemo for the very first time. Next week in part 2, I will talk about my experience more generally with food, hair loss, and chemo-induced peripheral neuropathy. Most importantly, I will share the key lessons I have learned while going through treatment. Treatment is not for everyone, and it is a personal choice. Chemo is tough, I'm not going to lie, and my mindset at the start was either going to be my best ally or my worst enemy. Personally, it brought out the warrior in me. Please note that nothing in this episode should be taken as medical advice. Always consult your doctor or medical professional to get advice relevant to your own circumstances. After hubby and I left the hospital on the 22nd of May, I got busy sorting out the legal document side of things. As long as my boys were taken care of, I was in a good place mentally. Then it was off to Sydney for the weekend. The Vivid Festival was on, and hubby had pre-planned it as a surprise for my 60th birthday. So there was no way I wasn't going. We cleared it with the surgeon anyway, just to be on the safe side. It was a great distraction, but hard not to think about the future. We didn't know how long I had left back then, and I still don't. None of us do, really. But I had already decided that I was going to punch the big C hard in the face while I'm still here, so I could stick around as long as possible. I still had a lot of things to do, after all. On the 27th of May, I met my oncologist for the first time. I'll call my oncologist Dr. P for the purposes of this podcast. Hubby was by my side, a constant presence, thank goodness. When I look back, the first steps all happened without any real decision making on my part. The referral to Dr. P was done by my surgeon, and I was told it was imperative I kicked off treatment as soon as possible. So when I met Dr. P, I was still a bit dazed and confused by what needed to happen, by who, when, and for how long. Right from the start, though, she made me feel comfortable and much more in control. The first thing Dr. P asked me was what I knew about this cancer and what had been explained to me so far. To be honest, with the initial shock, I hadn't even asked my surgeon for the details. All I knew was that it was stage 4 inoperable pancreatic cancer. I remember she gave me a little smile and said, "Don't worry, they, the surgeons, do the cutting, we do the curing." I liked her immediately and I felt in safe hands. Dr. P walked Mark and I through the images and showed us where the tumours were located. I'd seen these at a glance with my surgeon, but she explained them in more detail. My primary tumour was on the tail. I had several smaller ones on the omentum, one on the umbilicus, and several small lesions on the liver, what they call metastatic cancer. She explained very gently that it was terminal, but with the right approach and response to treatment, I could very well have quantity as well as quality of life. However, she was not in the business of giving a confirmed prognosis, and quite frankly, I didn't really want to know. As much relied on the patient's health going into treatment as well as the response to the treatment itself. My treatment would start with FOLFIRINOX, a combination chemo treatment used for patients with advanced stages of pancreatic cancer. It would contain 4 drugs: folinic acid, also known as leucovorin, fluorouracil, also known as 5-FU, irinotecan, and oxaliplatin. It would consist of 12 rounds with each treatment 14 days apart. I would have 3 days of treatment with 1 day in hospital and 2 days at home using a CAD pump. This would be followed by an 11-day rest period. I would need bloods prior to each round of treatment, which could be done through the usual blood testing centres using a Medicare Rule 3 patient card, which she gave me, or in hospital through the portacath, which was to be installed in my chest on day 1 of treatment to deliver the chemo intravenously. I would commence treatment in 2 days' time on the 29th of May. I did remember to ask again why surgery wasn't an option, and Dr. P explained to me it was too high risk and most surgeons would not do surgery on metastatic pancreatic cancer patients. Surgery on the pancreas, especially on the tail, is called distal pancreatectomy. Bit of a mouthful, which would have been an option if it hadn't spread. FYI, for the head of the pancreas, it's called Whipple surgery, which is a major operation and requires a resection of the pancreas. Anyway, it wasn't an option. Even if the tumours were successfully removed, I was told it would be a minimum 4 months recovery before chemo could start. All the while, anything undetected on the scans would continue to develop. Given the complexity with this stage and type of cancer, it made sense. Another FYI, which I was also told at this time, is that all metastatic tumours, regardless of where they are named after the primary. This is because they are comprised of the same types of cancer cells as the original tumour. So even though it was in other parts of my body, it was all caused by rogue pancreatic cells. Dr. P also discussed with me genomic testing, which looks for gene changes and other features in the cancer cells that would allow for more targeted treatment if anything was identified. This was free for the first go with a small gene panel of, I think, 14, and could be done provided enough of the tumour was taken during the biopsy. A larger gene panel is available but can cost into the thousands. My test here in Australia was requested through the Cancer Screening Program, also known as CASP. It would take up to 4 months to get the results, which would also be useful for assessing if I was a candidate in the future for any upcoming clinical trials. Getting the initial diagnosis from my surgeon threw me off course. My mind went in 50 million different directions. I had so many questions, most of which I forgot. If you're about to embark on your own journey with this or any cancer, be ready for that, as no matter how prepared you think you are, it's highly likely you won't be. Make sure to write down what you really want to know about the type of cancer you have got, or get your partner or friend to go along with you, pen and paper at the ready. Even if your surgeon's update is a bit of a blur, you can take the same or more questions with you to the oncologist. The more you know from a reliable source, the better you are informed and you can make the right choices for you. Dr. Google will be tempting, but trust me, I know a search of pancreatic cancer will return depressing stories, bad news, and nothing that will give you any sense of hope. I can only imagine it's the same for other cancers. I only did it the once. After that, I avoided it at all costs. Use reputable resources such as PubMed Central, the pancreatic foundations I mentioned in my podcast intro, the Peter MacCallum's Cancer Centre, the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Centre, also good resources, or others provided by your cancer care team. I started with these and I built on my knowledge from there. In hindsight, it would also have been beneficial to ask my surgeon to take enough of the tumour during the biopsy for genomic testing. I didn't know about the test until I saw Dr. P. Unfortunately, what was left of the sample after initial testing by the lab wasn't enough for CASP to use for testing. I could have gone back for another biopsy and pay for the test, but you'll understand why I didn't in episodes to come. I also wished I'd asked more about the surgical risk, given that the cancer was potentially decades in the making. This was a slow-moving cancer by all accounts, but I took the view it was only slow because I didn't know about it until it became stage 4. Hence the need for early testing and screening. But also some words of caution. Please don't go down a rabbit hole. Focus on what you can control. My mind was already spinning. The best thing I did was to take a breath and slow it right down. Day 1 of my chemo started as planned on the 29th of May. Mark took me to the hospital, and before going into the chemo ward, I had an appointment with Dr. P. First question from her, did I get my bloods done? That would be a no. I either didn't listen the first time or completely forgot that I needed to get my bloods done prior to each treatment, even if it was the first one. So off I went to the chemo ward to get my bloods done and results back to Dr. P to check for any anomalies. I also had my blood tumour marker done to set the baseline, which would be done every 3 to 6 months. My bloods all came back in normal range, and my tumour marker, called CA19.9, came back at 306 units per milliliter of blood, UML for short. This confirmed what we already knew in that there was a presence of pancreatic cancer cells in the blood outside of the normal reference range. I could talk about the ranges, but it's all a bit outside of my understanding, and I'd probably get it wrong. So I'll leave you to do your own research or ask your own doctor. What I do know is that anything below 34 is good, and below 5 means no cancer detected. So I had a target to aim for, and that was just fine by me. So blood's done, the go button was pressed, and off I went to the chemo ward. I then waited to get prepped for my portacath insertion. I sent Mark home at this point as there wasn't much he could do, and I was okay without company with so much going on. The insertion took about an hour or so under mild anaesthetic, and after a short recovery period, back I went to the chemo ward to start chemo. The pharmacist spoke to me first to tell me about the chemo concoction I was about to receive. We spoke about the common side effects such as nausea, diarrhea, fatigue. She also explained that I was to avoid touching or drinking anything cold when the oxyplatin was being administered. Overall, the whole dose would take approximately 5 hours, with a portacath flush at the end, which would take around 10 minutes. The remaining dose would be administered over 48 hours at home. Some of these things I already knew. So I was pretty laid back about the whole thing at the start of the day. Everything went seamlessly. The nurses on the ward were amazing. Big love to Jess, Leslie, and Ita if you are listening. In fact, they are all superstars, including the volunteers. How they do what they do day in and day out takes a special kind of person. Hats off to all of you. You are worth your weight in gold. It was a long day, but I had a chance to catch up on some reading and Netflix on my tablet. I didn't really experience any symptoms up to that point. With part 1 of round 1 done, Mark came to collect me, and I left the hospital with my CAD installed and ready for the next 48 hours. On leaving the hospital, the weather was quite cool, but I was masked up and thankfully didn't encounter any discomfort with breathing in the cold air. Something the nurses told me often catches people off guard, and they rush back to the ward feeling like they can't breathe and they're dying. The only sensation I had was with my tongue. It felt larger than normal, and it made it hard to form words, a bit like having a filling or tooth out at the dentist. A result of the irinotecan, I can never say that, I was to discover. I was a bit concerned about biting my tongue, so I refrained from talking until it wore off, which took a few hours, much to the delight of hubby, I'm sure. The next few days, the nausea kicked in. I had 2 anti-nausea tablets that I had to take first up over the 2 days at home, plus supplementary tablets. The nurses had told me to take the anti-nausea tablets prescribed over regular intervals, even if I didn't feel sick, as this would be a preventative measure rather than dealing with the after effects, which would be worse. Boy, oh boy, were they right. Of course I didn't listen and didn't take the tablets believing I didn't need them. But when the nausea kicked in, it was next level. I can only liken it to having chronic morning sickness or the worst hangover you will ever have in your life that goes on for days. It took a few days for me to get on top of it, at which point I had already dropped a few kilos and I was a bit off my food. The portacath site was very tender and I was also taking endone to deal with the pain. I was super tired, but sleeping with a portacath attached was new and I just couldn't get comfortable. I returned to the hospital on Friday to have the CAD removed. Quite rightly, I got a telling off by my care nurse for not following instructions. I left feeling a bit sheepish, with a vow to be less like a martyr and just take the damn pills. The worst day was the following Tuesday, which was 4 days post round 1. I struggled to get out of bed. Chemo had truly kicked my ass. It didn't last long, I had to say, and things did start to pick up relatively quickly, and by the Thursday I was feeling more normal. I had a few visitors to lift my spirits, which was great, and I went for a few walks in the sunshine with my dog Harry. By the end of the first week, I got a bit cocky with food, and that's when the diarrhea paid a visit. It was chronic, like someone had turned on a tap. After a quick call to my cancer care nurse, I took some Imodium, which did the trick. Thank God. Several days later, things took a turn for the worse. I had a fever and I had a terrible pain radiating down my right side. It felt like the worst kind of trap gas. I took some endone and monitored my temperature throughout the night. I was instructed that anything over 38 degrees centigrade, I was to come into emergency. I was sitting around 37.8, so I stayed put. In the morning, the pain had settled and my temperature was down. So I was confident it was possibly a result of too much food or eating too late at night. What did I know? I was seeing Dr. P and having treatment again in a few days, so I thought I would mention it then. On Wednesday, 12th of June, I was back at the hospital for round 2. I can tell you those 2 weeks go super quick. I'd had my bloods done at the local pathology centre and was in to see Dr. P prior to treatment when I got bad news. Treatment would be delayed a week. My neutrophils, white blood cells, were way too low and it would be too dangerous to proceed. I was disappointed, of course, but while sitting in front of Dr. P, the pain in my side was suddenly back and it was painful. I could hardly breathe. She immediately sent me for a CT scan and turns out I had a pulmonary embolism on my lung, possibly as a result of the portacath surgery and chemo happening on the same day. But it could also have been coincidence and more likely a result of the tumours which can cause blood clots. No wonder it was so painful. And I just popped a pill at the time without any more thought to it. I was incredibly lucky the outcome was not worse. And I was put on Clexane blood thinner to deal with the problem, which meant I had to inject myself every day for the next week until I returned to the hospital for further review. Sometimes. Welcome to chemo. I went into chemo a very fit individual with super positive attitude and the view I could cope with whatever it threw at me. But let me say, this chemo concoction I was on was a weapon of mass destruction. Not only did it kill the cancer cells, it was killing all the good cells too. My digestive system and immune system were taking a massive hit. I had no idea the nausea would be so debilitating, even with strong anti-nausea tablets at my disposal. I had walked into it like I was having surgical removal of a tooth. How naive. Nothing or no one can prepare you for the constant wave of nausea and diarrhea that catches you unawares and seriously dehydrates you in minutes. People who have been through it will warn you, like I am now. Take heed. Take the pills. Follow the advice given and know that the medical team have your back and have seen this thousands of times. I thought I could tough it out, not my finest moment. Once I got into a rhythm of taking the anti-nausea tablets, things settled down, but it took several rounds before I found the right balance. Also listen to your body closely. It is going through a massive shift when you go through chemo. It is not only fighting the cancer through its own support systems, but having to deal with the toxic load from the drugs. As soon as I had the pain in my side, I should have called the hospital. The embolism could have been disastrous, but I was super lucky and grateful that it went in my favour. Don't play Russian roulette with symptoms. If it feels wrong, it is wrong. Call someone and err on the side of caution. In part 2, I will talk more about my experience of chemo across the entire 12 rounds and where I'm up to now. It's not the greatest experience, but it can be life-saving. There is always a positive. It's definitely not easy, that's for sure. A lot depends on dose, a person's ability to bounce back, any comorbidities, and working with the cancer care team effectively. I have more lessons to share, including my experience with fatigue, thoughts on hair loss, and changes in appetite. But for me, mindset and supporting my body's own ability to heal itself was and still is the key. I talk about lifestyle changes in a later episode. Thanks so much for tuning in and taking the time to listen. Someone once said, and I can't remember who or where it came from, don't be sad for me. We all come into this world to be tourists, enjoy life, go sightseeing, and do good deeds. I just happen to be leaving earlier than others. I love this and found it very inspiring, and it reminded me that the most important good deeds we can do, especially during challenging times, is towards ourselves. This was never more true for me than during chemo, and I hope my story inspires you to do the same. Comments, feedback, or questions are all welcome. If you have a specific topic you'd like me to cover, please let me know. Also, if you're getting value from this podcast so far, be sure to share it and give it a rating so it reaches as many people as possible. Until next time, bye for now, and love and light to you all.